Okay, everybody, if y'all will take your seats. It's 9:30. All right, Cole, if you would like to take the roll, please.
Andrews. Here. Alan Cockrell.
Here.
Pat Calhoun. Patrick Garcia, Corey Chavez. Will Conlon. Charlie Slatton. Dick Hildebrand. Here. Kenneth Eller for Kevin Yonner. Here. Tom Youngman.
Here.
Russell Davis.
Here.
Glenn Lord.
Present.
Dan Meyer. Here. Gary Middleton.
Here.
Tom Mims.
Here.
Jonathan Stinson for Kevin Madison.
Present.
Liliana Pena.
Here.
Roberto Ramos.
Here.
Steve Ramsey.
Here.
Weldon Riggs.
Here.
Rose Ruiz.
Here.
Diane Savage.
Here.
Suzanne Scott.
Here.
Greg Singleton. Heather Sumter.
Here.
Tom Taggart.
Here.
Ian Taylor.
Here.
Diane Watson.
Annalisa Peace for Diane.
Robert Puente.
Here.
Adam Ublonsky. Elizabeth McCoy.
Here.
Ronald Fiedler. Liliana Delgado. Don McGee. Marty Kelly.
Chad Norris is here for Mark Bennett.
Joseph McDaniel. Jamie McCool.
Here.
Carl Rule. And Lawrence Brown for Rusty Ray.
Here.
Is there anybody I didn't call?
Charles Platt.
We have quorum.
All right, great. All right, public comment, we have one that signed out, Rachel Sywinski. There she is. I think, yeah. Can you get up there, okay? Okay.
Well, good morning, and thank you for being here today. My name is Rachel Zielinski. I've spoken to the group before. I submitted a public comment in May on a written form, and I just wanted to bring it to you in person to let you know that one of the groups with whom some of you are very familiar, the San Antonio Interfaith Power and Light, which was very active in the 2016 cycle, writing a white paper and making some suggestions, and I appreciate the response from the group about those, that the name of that group has changed because we were a group affiliate of Texas Impact. Texas Impact changed its policies asking the group affiliates to pay dues as a group, and although some of us are continue to be active members of Texas Impact as individuals, the group chose not to pay the dues, and therefore we have gone back to the original name of the group, which was San Antonio Interfaith Environmental Network. So if you see that name, such as recently co-sponsored a faith and climate change conference at Trinity University, then please be aware that that is the same group. Also, in the past, I've mentioned to you that the extreme difficulty, if you're a member of the public, in finding information about your meetings on the website, and I tried this time looking at a general search engine, and please consider that I am more aware of what you're doing than 99.9% of the people who live in your area. I put South Central Texas Regional Water Planning Group, Region L, November 1st, 2018 meeting. It took 4 tries to find a link that would come up to this meeting on your website. Being very familiar with it, I realized I had to go to the 2021 cycle, and that's where I could find it myself. But I don't think anyone else, very few people would be trying to find it. If they're not familiar, they're not going to know where to go. But most importantly, on the Texas Water Development Board website, there, in both of the sections for Region L, it lists this meeting today, but on the link that tells you to go there for the meeting and the agenda, it goes directly to the 2014 documents, and it's a dead end. So going to that website is not taking it to where you have the information. So that seems to be a misconnect between the two organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that information. We'll try to get that fixed for sure. Thank you for giving us that feedback. We'll work on that. All right, next is the approval of the minutes from the August 2nd meeting. You'll have the chance to review. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Okay, Tim moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Con. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. All right, next is the status of the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan. Scott?
Scott Storman will be delivering this, and Scott, if you'll go to the podium, and I'll just introduce you while you're making your way up there. Scott's been on the job probably about 2 months as the program manager for the HCP, and his background is quite broad and varied in environmental issues, water issues, and energy issues, and we're thrilled to have him with us. So this will be his first appearance before this group, the first of many, I suspect or hope, and with that, I'll turn it over to Scott to give us the latest on the HCP.
Well, thank you, Roland, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the opportunity to be here and speak with you for a few minutes, give you a brief update on what's going on with the EAHCP. I've been in the job for 2 weeks, 2 months. Sometimes it feels like I'm still at 2 weeks. Brock Curry, our deputy general manager, he says, you still drinking out of the fire hose? He said, yes. He said, can you taste the water? I said, yes, it's good old Edwards Aquifer water. So it's a little crazy and hurried at points, but currently what we've had several things come about. We had our most recent implementing committee meeting and our stakeholder committee meeting on October 18th. And during that meeting, we had a couple of items that were of significance that I'll just mention. You can find more information on on the EHCP website. If you need to, but please, I can give you one of my business cards and you can contact me as well. The first item would be about our third and most anticipated report coming from the National Academies of Sciences. We've done 2 other reports with them. Basically, it's a 5-year process where they have come and looked at the program in its entirety and looked at the conservation measures and basically come back with their third-party, expert opinion on whether we, as the EHCP, as it's been set up, have the ability through our biological measures, biological objectives, and through the conservation measures, will meet, preserve the habitat, meet the measures and goals that have been set out over the past, I guess really for the past 8 to 10 years, but specifically the past 6, 7 years. They came back with a very, very positive report in general. It said that it was very likely that we will be, or that likely that we will meet our objectives in with our conservation measures. And that was what we wanted to hear. It didn't have to be a super high thumbs up, but it was a solid thumbs up. And this is what we've worked hard for. People before me have put in a lot more blood, sweat, and tears in many, many meetings and many conversations with our implementing committee, as well as meeting with their research team. That was a nationwide research team that they put together. So that was a very positive thing to hear. We'll be continuing to roll out the findings in that report, and those findings will now inform what we're moving into right now, which is our phase 2 work plan development. We're moving into phase 2 of our incidental take permit, or ITP as it's called. The ITP is the permit. There's a 15-year permit approved by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. EAA is the official facilitator of that process on behalf of the permittees, which are San Antonio Water Systems for City of San Antonio, City of San Marcos, City of New Braunfels, Texas State University, and then the EAA itself. In that role, we are now moving in from the phase 1, which was basically the development of the conservation measures, all of the hard science that's gone into the ecological model. Now that we've also developed a flow model of the recharge in the aquifer, demonstrating the various parameters that we need to live within to make sure that we could provide adequate flow for the species that are being protected under the incidental take permit. That phase 2 process is underway. The National Academies of Sciences report will inform what we propose in the phase 2. The phase 2 will be predominantly an outgrowth of the phase 1 conservation measures. They have been successful. So as they say, if you're on a good horse, don't change horses. So we won't be changing many of those conservation measures. We'll continue to move forward on them. We will be amending them and augmenting them with information and data that's been provided from the NAS report, the NAS report. So that will be coming forward. We'll be having that. We'll be providing a draft to our implementing committee on December 20th. So you will have more to report in coming months, and potentially we can take a deeper dive into some of that information as we get to that stage. But those are the 2 primary items I wanted to brief you on. The phase 2 will be implemented sometime in the spring of 2019. So it's a process, an iterative process of working with work groups and committees of us getting that phase 2, and that will set the trajectory for us through the end of the incidental take permit until 2028. So look to hear more about that in the coming months.
Great.
Any questions?
Anybody have any questions of Scott? Well, welcome
Well,
to
thank
the
you.
position. We're glad to have you. Of course, we are very familiar with you in some of your former capacities.
Thank you.
I think you're obviously going to be a great asset to the team, and we really look forward to having you at our meetings and giving us great updates on what's happening with you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, so don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so the next item, as y'all remember, we are in the process of trying to fill all of our vacancies, and we still have small business vacancies, so we put that back out again because we didn't have any applicants the first time around, and we wanted to see if we could find some applicants. We were fortunate to have one applicant, and he's here today, and I wanted y'all to have the opportunity to get to know him before we take action. Mitch Sowards here. You have I think you have his application in front of you. I wanted to give him a couple of minutes just to introduce himself to you and kind of talk a little bit about his small business that he has here. So, Mitch?
Would you like me to go to the podium?
Sure, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. As Suzanne said, she just asked me to speak for a couple of minutes. I'll try to keep it short. I am a lifelong San Antonio resident, although I was not born in San Antonio. I was born in Detroit. So my wife says that doesn't count. You're not a native Texan if you weren't born here, but I've been here since I was 8 months old. My mom's a native Texan, and then they moved back to San Antonio when I was 8 months old. So that gives me about 58 years of San Antonio residence. In terms of small business, I started the smallest of the small. I started a IT consulting business out of a spare bedroom in my house in 1991. And my wife and I have now grown that business to employ 30 people here in San Antonio. The company we own is called Entrust Technology Services. And we're an IT services company here in San Antonio. And as I said, that's been since 1991, so I have a long history here in San Antonio as a small businessman in conjunction with my wife, who is one of the partners in the company. And we also have 3 other partners, all employees who have stepped up and become partners in the company. And so we're very proud to be a small business in San Antonio, and I think I am well able to represent the small business voice of San Antonio. And I'll just add that in addition to that, in addition to living here as a lifetime resident, my mother's family came to Texas in the 1850s and still owns ranch property outside of Nehenes, Texas. And so I am somewhat familiar with the challenges of ranchers and farmers in the state of Texas and the water demands. So I'll leave it at that and see if anyone has any questions for me.
Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask of Mitch? In my conversations with him this morning, I also, obviously when we come to the table as members of this committee, we're not all water experts, and we don't need to all be water experts. What we need to do is bring our talents and our expertise to the table so that we have a variety of opinions about what's going on and the decisions that are being made. And obviously from a small business perspective, he's had to make business decisions and grow businesses and understand the complexity of decisions that are being made. So I was very intrigued when talking to him this morning about that, about how you have to make very complicated decisions even though you have a very small business. So anybody have any questions of him? All right, so I guess we need to take an action on filling the one vacancy for small business. So would someone like to, I guess he's the nominee, so I will put on the table a motion to accept Mitch Sowards as the small business representative.
So moved.
Okay, I think we have Greg moved, and we'll have Weldon second. So all those in favor of approving that appointment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? All right, well, Mitch, welcome to the group. You're down there on the end there. You get to go right to work. So the next agenda item is really what we want to do regarding the consideration of that other vacancy. So this is now would be if we want to go out and try to secure another small business representative, we can do that and go one more time out with a public notice on that. Or we can open up the conversation to see if we want to just keep it vacant and be done with it, or if we want to consider some other, I guess we can consider another, changing that from a small business to something else. Is that what y'all, I mean?
You could.
We don't really want to do that just because it would really change the whole dynamics of what we've got going on here. But I just need to get a sense of what y'all would like to do with that remaining vacancy. We've had trouble getting small businesses this time, for sure, but
There is a mechanism to just leave it open.
you just leave it and, well, we would have, I mean, the way I understand it is if we're going to entertain any new nominations throughout this process until the next cycle, we'd have to go through a public process of putting the notices out, having nominations officially submitted. We just can't have someone come and say, hey, I'd like to be that small business rep. It has to go through the process. So we would just have to decide. Yes.
I would like to start a debate about keeping it the way it is. I think we're very large already. I think we're one of the largest in the state, aren't we not? They're
Yes.
shaking their head. So as long as we're there already, might as well not add to it.
Okay. Any other comments in that regard? Just kind of keeping with the one small business representative and just not going out again at this point? I mean, we're starting to get into the real work of the group, and starting today with water management strategies, and as it is, Mitch is going to have to be learning a lot very quickly to participate on the committee, and someone coming in yet another quarter out missed the opportunity of really what we're going to be talking about today.
So then we could not do anything and not do a formal search for a formal decision not to do it, just leave it as is for a while.
That's right, we would just take no action and not direct, I'm sorry.
It would require some action because there's 32 members with one vacancy right now. So if you're trying to do away with one of the small business categories, you'd have to take an action to.
Well, if we just leave it vacant, I'm not saying that we're necessarily changing the membership, I think the idea here is just leave it vacant. We're not changing the,
I think you do the guy.
yeah. So when you do your quorum call, that would be considered a vacancy,
So
right?
eventually, right, so eventually we have to, when we go out again for nominations.
Next time. Would that be all right? We can just leave it vacant? Yes. So does that seem to be the consensus? I'm seeing heads nodding around, so we're just going to keep it vacant at this time, not change the membership or anything like that. We can just decide that next time we make the decision about going out for nominations. All right? Perfect. Thank you all very much. All right, next is the calendar. Cole, would you like to go over the calendar?
So not much has changed. Same calendar we give you every year. The only exception would be the first meeting tentatively scheduled for January 31st to other conflicts that we have. There's several things going on in early February that would obligate members. So January 31 would be the first quarter one meeting. The others would be the first Thursdays of May, August, and November.
Okay. Any concerns about this schedule? Can we adopt this by consensus then? All right, perfect. We'll move forward with this schedule. All right. Next is an update on the VBEST work and the variety of studies you have in your packet. A update that Cole had received. We just asked the Water Development Board to kind of give us an update on all the various studies that have been funded for the Guadalupe, San Antonio River Basin VBEST. And you can see here, and you can read in your packet, that the first study, the assessing the effects of the freshwater inflows study, there has been some delay in that, in the completion of that study, largely due to the Hurricane Harvey and some of those delays that have really taken away the contractor's ability to finish that. So we're kind of on a standstill to try to get that next phase of that project done. We're going to be talking, and the rest of them have already been, or in some state of being either contracted or in negotiations for the rest of these studies. So from the VBASC perspective, we're going to have to discuss what we want to do regarding this first study and see if, because it all comes down to timing and when the money needs to be spent and how it can be, how this study can move forward into the next phase. So we're kind of talking through all of those options at this point to see maybe if either the funding that was allocated toward the next phase of this could potentially be allocated to some of these other studies that may have gotten not as much funding as they needed to do the full scope. So we're going to have to kind of work on this with the Water Development Board. But we are going to be scheduling a VBASC meeting probably right after the first of the year. So Cole's going to be reaching out to try to get a meeting scheduled so that we can, one, get updates on the studies, because some of these studies have been completed, and some of the early phases of some of these studies have been completed. So we want to be able to brief on that, as well as then discuss the status of these existing studies. So not a lot of update at this point, but just wanted you to see how many of these studies that were funded are moving forward for this biennium. Any questions? Okay, if y'all have any questions, let me know, and we can see what we can find out for you. All right, so next we have the Water Development Board. Elizabeth.
Good morning, everyone. I have a few updates for you since our last meeting. The Water Development Board has reviewed the Regional Technical Memorandum, and that document was found to be administratively complete. PDF copies of each of the region's technical memorandums are available on the Water Development Board's website if anyone's interested in seeing some of the midpoint planning data from the other regions. The Water Development Board has also created an interactive map that links to the planning database and displays the draft needs and surplus data for each of the WUGs. So it's a statewide map that shows points for each of the water user groups, and they're color-coded red or green depending upon if there are surpluses or needs for each of those groups. So it's a tool that was developed primarily for the consultants to use for their data checks, but it can also be used to facilitate consideration of regional projects whenever you guys are developing the plans. We have 2 tools for evaluating water management strategies that are going to be available in December. The first is a conservation planning tool, which is new and optional for the planning groups to use, but it can help calculate potential volumes for municipal water conservation strategies. The second tool is the uniform costing tool, which is required to be used when estimating project costs in lieu of any more detailed or accurate information that you have. This tool has been updated to address some bugs since the last cycle and update some of the costing data, and so that will also be available in December. Switching gears a little bit, the Water Development Board is going through the process of amending the 2017 State Water Plan, and this was to incorporate the recent 2016 Regional Water Plan amendment that added capital costs for the SAWS Advanced Meter Infrastructure Project. And that State Water Plan amendment is scheduled to go in front of the board in December. We recently emailed out some information on the timeline for requesting the Water Development Board to perform the socioeconomic impact analysis. So this is a required analysis of not meeting identified water needs. Historically, planning groups have requested that the Water Development Board perform this analysis on their behalf. And so to do this, the planning group must take action on the request and then email that request to the project manager. And there are 2 key dates to take note of for this timeline. A request must be submitted to the board by July of 2019. And then secondly, the analysis is going to be developed based on the needs in the water planning database as of May 31st, 2019. And this is in order to have the analysis performed and the reports prepared for inclusion in the initially prepared plans. At the end of November, the Uniform Stakeholders Committee will be meeting in Austin to review uniform standards for prioritizing projects in the regional water plans. And briefly, some background on this. The Uniform Standards Stakeholder Committee was created by House Bill 4 and is comprised of the regional planning group chairs or their designees. And so this committee established the uniform standards which are used by the planning groups to prioritize projects in their regional water plans. The committee meets at least once per planning cycle to review and consider any updates to those standards. The public comment period for this draft state flood assessment closed on October the 3rd. Water Development Board staff are considering comments that were received and finalizing the state flood assessment. It's going to be presented to the board for consideration before the end of the year. Registration is still open for the Water Development Board's Water for Texas Conference, which is going to be held in Austin January 23rd through 25th. We've got more information available on our website on that. And then at the October Regional Worker Meeting, there was some interest in SWIFT funding and regional projects that have received SWIFT funding. So I just wanted to share a little bit on that. Since the first SWIFT cycle in 2015, 6 projects from Regional have received a total amount of just under $500 million of SWIFT funds. To date, the SWIFT program has committed over $8.1 billion of funds for water infrastructure projects across the state. I've got some additional information in your meeting materials, and then we have information on the Water Development Board's website. And then I've passed out updated rules pamphlets. I think I might be a few short, so I apologize for that. I'll bring a few extras with me at the next meeting. Are there any questions? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so on the chair's report, you can see in your packet, there was the conference call on October the 22nd that I participated in along with Steve and Cole. And much of what was just reported was kind of talked about as part of the conference call. And I know that Brian's going to be talking in a little bit about this decision on the socioeconomic impact. We have always, we will ask you to allow for us to get the Water Development Board to do that assessment for us. But the timeline, I think Brian will go over as part of his report, right? When we have to make that decision. So most of what she talked about it was talked about in the call, so no need to repeat that. However, I am going to be participating in the Uniform Standards meeting on November 28th, and I'd asked Cole to include in the packet under the chair's report the matrix that we use in that in the evaluation, and just to see if y'all have any feedback on this. Again, Con was part of the original group that came together several years ago when we started this process of doing this prioritization based on this matrix. And he's obviously still part of our committee and can give you some background on that. But they met early, I guess it was 2011 or something like that, I think, and came up with these original criteria. Then they revisited it in 2015 to see if they wanted to make any changes, and there were no changes made to the criteria. So these criteria were still used for the 2016 plan. Now, of course, we have to go through the process again for this next plan. Now, one of the things that, just to inform some of the members of this group that may not understand how this works, this matrix here that we will go through, and it's a requirement that each of the projects that we decide on the strategies go through in this matrix and get evaluated, and then we submit sort of a prioritization spreadsheet along with the plan that kind of racks and stacks each of the projects based on these criteria. And then that goes into the overall, for those people that are applying for SWIFT funding, that goes into the matrix that then the Water Development Board applies on top of it. So if I'm not mistaken, the prioritization assigned by the Regional Water Planning Group is 15 points of a 100-point scale. So there's the other things that are looked at by the Water Development Board is they have sort of the highest considerations are given to projects that serve a large population base. That gets 30 points. That provides assistance to a diverse urban and rural population. That's another 30 points. Provides regionalization, which is based on the number of entities served in addition to the applicant. That's another 30 points. And meets the high percentage of water supply needs. That's another, that's another of the higher considerations matrix that they use. And then other considerations that they look at are local contributions, including federal funding, financial capability of the applicant to repay, emergency needs, readiness to proceed, demonstration of projected effect of the project on water conservation, including preventing water loss. All of those are smaller maximum points, but again, it's a sort of a 100-point scale that can be given to these. And then ours is up to a maximum of 15 points. So all that to say that this does feed into the overall SWIFT decision-making process. One of the things that I've sort of been looking at, because we've now have some experience with SWIFT now, based on the last couple of years, are some of the things that we're looking at duplicative to what the state's looking at in other criteria, and so that I think we'll have a conversation about that. But is there anything that we feel, based on those things that I just mentioned to you, that y'all would want us to consider as we're looking at what the regional planning group is looking at, to differentiate that from some of the other criteria that the Water Development Board is also looking at? So I can have some guidance to take into that November 28th meeting if there are any concerns or ideas that y'all would have based on experience. Yes, Annalise.
A while back, I think there was a project that was disputed and a lot of information was presented to this body about why that project was disputed, and it went ahead and went on. So some kind of criteria that could address those concerns from the local community.
Okay. Some sort of public feedback concept, is that what you're
Yeah.
thinking about? Yes.
You didn't mention return on investment. I don't think in any of those lists. You could run a return on investment on a safety project or an environmental project, so it doesn't stop you from doing a return on investment. It just seemed like that would be on the list somewhere.
Okay.
I may have missed it. I mean,
No, I mean, they, obviously, I think the Water Development Board, I would imagine, does some type of financial analysis in addition to these criteria. Is that correct?
So once an applicant submits an abridged application, we do an initial analysis, which includes looking at regional prioritization, and we do a ranking, but looking at finances and that kind of thing is part of the business process.
Okay. So it may not be included here is what she's saying. It may be an analysis that they do outside of this prioritization to do the financial analysis on that return on investment.
you would think that project people that wanted it would do the return on investment. I would think.
Yeah, I think that they do have to submit sort of I think the Water Development Board is looking at primarily is making sure that the water project that's being put forward for funding has the ability to repay, for one, because this is about a loan that's being given to them. They want to make sure that there's contracts in place or there's opportunities that there's going to be funding that's going to pay back the board. But I think they probably also look at how viable is the project, and is it going to move forward in a way that's going to be, financially a good investment for the state to put their money into. I would suspect but I can ask them to get some detail on that when I meet on the 28th to see what kind of financial return on investment analyses that are done outside of this ranking process, and I'll bring that back to the next meeting.
If I may, I share your opinion. I don't think the project necessarily is generating a profit.
Right.
It's you design your
Right.
cost of that water to cover the cost of the project, not necessarily, it's not an investment to generate revenues. It's a cost of service type model that we build into it.
Because they have to make sure, I think that the Water Development Board is going to want to make sure that there's a rate model that would support the project over time, and that the rates that are being calculated by the sponsor of the project is enough and sufficient enough to follow and pay the cost associated with the project.
Right.
So that's kind of the analysis that they would do on that return on their investment, to make sure their investment's good enough to get the return, the payment up for the loan.
Suzanne?
Yes, Con?
Just in general, I would caution against tinkering with this too much because in its development, there were efforts by some to structure this thing so that it was biased for or against certain projects. And we ended up with a very, very delicate matrix here that everybody finally agreed to, but not without a whole lot of work. And if we start changing anything in here, it could become unraveled pretty quickly.
No,
I'm just raising that concern.
No, I can understand that, especially because you have all these regions coming together and trying to come up with an agreement on that. I think that, and I agree with you, and I think that one of the things that we'll learn as we come together is sort of how it's working. I mean, now that there's really money, I mean, the first years that you did it, there really wasn't as much money available to actually put towards projects. Now that we have a little bit more experience in the process that the Water Development Board's going to in prioritization, you know, how's it working? And is this seem to be the best way of making the decisions? And if it seems to be working and everyone that's going through the process feels like it's, this along with other criteria seem to be representing those applicants well, then it may, like you say, let sleeping dogs lie and let's move on. But I mean, I guess those that have had experience, I mean, obviously we have some of you here that have gone through the SWIFT process. Can y'all enlighten us about the process and how was it? And does it seem to be working as far as the matrix goes that they use? Anyone like to share?
From GBRE's perspective, I wouldn't say that we have too many criticisms of it. Regarding the ability to repay, obviously that information is included both in the initial application and then when the Water Development Board invites you in for the full application, that ability to repay, obviously because HB4 is predicated on contract revenue pledges. So no, I mean, we feel like both the uniform standards and then the additional qualifications that the board puts us through are sufficient. I would say on the uniform standards, we do like the fact that it's more of a quantitative, less subjective approach. It's more formulaic, so some of the concerns aren't baked in. However, I will say if the Water Development Board looks to increase the weight of the regional scores, maybe then we should have another conversation about what really goes into that. But to the comments of it possibly being duplicative of what the board looks at as well, I would just say, again, this is each region's ability to provide that score so it gets rolled up into that larger pie that the Water Development Board looks at. Otherwise, I love it for $165 million reason.
With regards to Canyon Region, the matrix is fine. I think what I would like to see with regards to the Water Development Board is if I see large population centers as one of the criteria the Water Development Board uses.
Yes.
I think what you should also have some discussion about is some of the smaller populations, the disadvantaged areas. I know there is state funding for some of these smaller WUGs, but you know, if there would be some discussion as to how we can start getting some of these WUGs and be brought to the table. That really don't have money, but not really have some money, but don't have the ability to go after some of this funding. And that's my concern.
Okay. Good point. Tom, did y'all have a project, right?
We do in the sense that we're a member of the Alliance Regional Water Authority, and I think that the process has worked, well for us. And I don't think that we felt there was any particular, hurdles or anything we didn't understand about the process. So, I mean, I think it's functioning. I think the fact that they basically loaned $8 billion in commitments at this point, speaks to that. And I think it's satisfying the requirements. So. I guess the only comment I would make in relation to the ROI, and I understand, the impetus on that. I think the uniform standards kind of addresses that in the inverse in this section 5 in relation to water cost effectiveness. And the public's, return on investment in that sense is viewed as, more affordable water costs, and that being a measure of how to rank those projects. Since they're public entities, and as Mr. Taylor pointed out, I mean, we don't seek to make profits. We seek to serve it at the lowest reasonable cost that we can do that at. And I think that's what this kind of focuses on in relation to cost effectiveness.
If you had two projects that were big projects not a heck of a lot of money. It sounds like you got a lot of money, but return on investment might be a criteria for choosing one over the other. That's all I was thinking.
Alan, did y'all went through it as well, didn't you?
We went through the process, yes. I think what we're finding, or what Shirks Again is finding, is after you get approved and after the funds are approved, just getting the release from the Water Development Board is a little difficult at best. But as far as this process and assigning a priority for the projects, I think it was very fair.
Okay. Any other comments? Do you have something?
You know, we're big enough to where we have the luxury of trying to get funding from other sources, so we really haven't gone after some of these funds. There's a lot of, in our opinion, red tape, but that doesn't mean it's bad. That means there's a lot of protections there, and sometimes you have to look at those protections and see what they are and why they're there. So what I'm saying is that for some entities, it's red tape, and you'd rather not do it. For others, it's just the cost of doing business. You need to submit those types of very detailed applications. So I guess what I'm saying is it really doesn't have an effect one way or the other.
Okay. All right, well, if y'all think of anything that you'd like for me to take forward, let me know. But at this point, it seems like generally it's working. Let's not mess with it too much. And I'll see what some of the other regional planning groups are saying to see if they're having the same opinion that folks around this table are having. But I appreciate the input, and I will let you know how it goes when we meet again in January. Thank you. All right, the next item is discussion and appropriate action regarding the consultant's work and schedule. So, Brian.
Hello, everyone. A couple things on this agenda item. Can you hear me? So the first thing, we typically talk about our schedule, just where we are, how things are moving. We are in November 2018 at this point. We are still working on existing supplies to some degree. Most of those have been nailed down at this point. We'll talk about one of the items later on today. Identification of needs are predicated on the existing supplies and also the population water demand projections, which we will talk about again today. So that kind of goes on as well. As you recall, at our last meeting, we started talking about water management strategies, and so we started that process, and that'll continue on for this meeting, as well as most of the meetings next year, actually all the meetings next year, whether we're talking about which strategies we want to evaluate or results of those evaluations and other activities as well. We're all aware the Texas legislative session starts soon, so we don't anticipate any changes happening that would affect this cycle, but that there are some that might affect the next cycle, so that's always something to keep in mind. We are still working towards, well, I should mention that since our last meeting, we did turn in the technical memorandum as promised. We put the information up on the website in a timely fashion for review. I don't know if you had a chance to review that, but we met that September 10th deadline. We've since heard back, as Mr. McCoy mentioned, the approval of our technical memorandum, documenting where we are in the process, and the acknowledgement that we are not going to do simplified planning. So that's good. And then, so we're still working towards our next major deadline, which would be March 3rd, 2020, when our initial prepared plan, the IPP, is due. That's our draft plan. Looking at doing at least one as required, or as many as 3 as we've done in the past, public hearings, after that, probably April or May of that year, of 2020. And then getting comments back from the public, from various state agencies, including the Water Development Board and other entities as well, to finalize the plan by October 14th of 2020. As McCoy mentioned, a date also between now and March 3rd, she mentioned May 31st, 2019 being the point at which we need to have our needs not 100% final, but as close as we can, so that the socioeconomic impact of not meeting needs can be evaluated by the Water Loan Board. It is my plan to ask this group to consider the Water Loan Board performing that analysis for us in this planning cycle at our next planning group meeting, so January 31st meeting. We'll ask for that analysis to be performed. We'll finalize, we'll get everything in the database that we know at that time, May 31st, so the board can perform that for us and get it back to us in a timely fashion. So just some history on that. We are now in the 5th cycle of the planning process. For the previous 4 cycles, this planning group has asked the Water Loan Board to perform that analysis for us, as with most regions around the state. If memory serves me correctly, and I might be wrong, but this is the only one I know of, Region H tried to perform that analysis once and decided not to do it themselves, and has since defaulted to the Water Loan Board as well. It's a resource available to us, and I highly recommend we take advantage of it. But we do have to make a formal request, and as I mentioned, we would like to do that probably in our January 31st meeting. So, any questions regarding schedule? Okay. The other item on this agenda that I'd like to speak about are, I promised the last planning group meeting, I promised to have a summary of the needs analysis for you to review, and that's not in the packet itself. It's in a separate handout. I brought it with me today.
Looks like this.
So I want to just give a general overview of kind of where we are in the region in terms of demands, supplies, and needs, and just kind of graphically show you, not pretty high level here. I have all the data if you would like something specific, but what I chose to do is look at region-wide, both from a municipal standpoint and non-municipal standpoint. And then also I looked at our major water providers that we designated earlier in the cycle, those that are WUGs, water user groups, not necessarily wholesale water providers yet, but I put that information. So Braunfels, San Antonio, San Marcos, and Victoria are represented as well. So without further ado, region-wide, from a municipal standpoint, we have about 3 million people in this region. We're growing to about 5.2 million by 2070. Current 2020 water demands are estimated to be about 432,000 acre-feet of deep water per year, growing to almost 700,000 by 2070. So not quite doubling, but because there is passive conservation and advanced conservation going on around the region, but that it is growing pretty rapidly. And just so you know, before I move on, all my graphics are similar in that population, if it's listed as in black, the blue line would be the demand projection, the green line would be existing supply, and the red line would be those needs, those shortages that we have to make up as part of the planning process. So needs across the region, about 27,000 acre-feet in 2020, growing to over 200,000, almost 220,000 by 2070. So again, and I should mention too, when population is presented, it's on the right-hand axis here, where all the other water quantities are on the left-hand axis. So this is a big picture of the entire region. Also looking at the entire region from a non-municipal standpoint, people associated with non-municipal, these are your 5 non-municipal categories, including irrigation, electric, manufacturing, or sometimes we call it industrial, mining, and livestock. But non-municipal demand remains fairly constant, 615,000 to 617,000. Our needs, therefore, remain fairly constant, although there is some decline in supply over time, from 181 up to 189. And if you were curious about the breakout here, I put the percentages here of what makes up non-municipal. And this is pretty constant across the planning horizon, whether we're talking about decade 2020 or we're talking about decade 2050 or 2070. It's generally about this. 58% is irrigation of our non-municipal demands. Steam electrics is the next biggest category, which is our power generation, 17%. Manufacturing and industrial is 12%, mining makes up about 8%, and livestock makes up about 5% of our non-municipal demands. Any questions on this before I move on?
Where does the usage of water by oil companies doing fracking fall in this category?
That would be mine. And we've looked at that in the past cycle. We looked at it earlier in this cycle. We looked at it in the previous cycle as well. They are using large quantities of water over very short periods of time. So when you look at it as compared to traditional mining activities or whatever, it's actually a fairly small percentage of the water use. But it is it's a large amount over a 2 to 3 day period at this well, and then it goes to the next well, etc. So, yeah.
Brian, do these categories reflect the actual need or the entire proportion?
I'm sorry, what?
The categories irrigation, steam, and electric, manufacturing, do they represent percentages of the need, or do they
percentage
represent
of the demand?
the demand?
That's,
Okay.
Sorry, that's percentage of the demand there. Need-wise, we're going to find most of our need is probably in the irrigation category.
Okay.
I can get that information if you want me to email it to you.
No, I just
Okay.
needed a little context.
And irrigation is always a difficult area for us. From a cost standpoint, it's very difficult to develop water management strategies that are cost effective for our area farmers and ranchers. And so often in the previous 4 planning cycles, we've had at least one or multiple counties that have shown where we have not met that irrigation need in the past because of that. And we've written a justification for that because of the cost. Yes, sir.
Brian, your source for livestock is 5%. How did y'all come about this figure?
That's just from the projections from the Water on Board. They have processes to make water demand projections for all these categories, all 5 categories. And when you just look at their projection for our region in terms of livestock versus the entire of the non-municipal demand, that's 5% of the non-municipal demand. That's what that number is. And it varies county by county. It's not, it depends, if you're in Guadalupe and Gonzales County, it might be much different than if you're in, say, County, Victoria. Maybe not, I could be wrong.
Which I think is good. I've seen some data that accuses livestock production use of water like 20 to 25%.
Of the non-municipal portion, that'd be a lot.
Which I think is a little outrageous. I like your figure better.
Switching gears and just picking on a few folks. Again, I chose the major water providers that we had discussed earlier. So the city of New Braunfels, population here is shown to grow from about 75,000 to over double, 167,000 by 2070. Their demand roughly 15,000 acre feet a year, growing to 33,000 acre feet a year. And their needs currently are at 0. If you look at their existing supplies today versus their projected 2020 demand, but by 2070 that need will be as much as 15,000 acre feet, which is roughly about 13, 14 MGD. If you math quickly, if you're familiar with those numbers. San Antonio Water Systems, our largest water user group, municipal water user group, I should say. Population served about 1.8 million, growing almost 3 million by 2070. Demand 239,000 acre feet, growing over 350,000 acre feet. And needs currently good today, no problems in 2020, especially with Vista Ridge online. Growing to almost, or about 95,000 acre feet by 2070. San Marcos, again, similar situation, 71,000, more than doubling by 2070 to 171,000. Demand's about 11,000 acre feet by 2020, growing to 25,000 acre feet by 2070, and needs, no needs by 2020 or even 2030, but shortly thereafter 2030, if you look right there, that's where the water demand and the existing supply line cross. Starting showing some needs there, growing to about 12,000 acre feet by 2027. And Finally, Victoria, similar story, 68,000 people served today, 84,000 by 2070. Water demand is 17,000 up to about 20,000 by 2070, and then some needs initially growing to 12,000 acre foot by 2070. So that's what I have for you today, and just giving you a neat kind of summary. A lot of this data is still available on our website, although it's been tweaked a little bit since then. Most of the numbers are still fairly correct. Again, this is an ongoing process. Those numbers are available in that spreadsheet that's on our regional website. So a lot of that data is available to you if you want to review it and have questions.
Brian, I have a question regarding the cities. Is that based on ETJ or is that based on CCN or what is that based on?
This is utility, yeah, it's city utilities, so it's based on their CCN.
So the city?
Yeah.
Okay, so for instance, when you look at New Braunfels, it's just, that's NBU, correct? It's not.
It's NBU.
It's not in your like Green Valley or anything?
No, it's just NBU.
So we're serving outside the CCN now, Las Vegas is about half, so.
Right.
It does not include that, correct?
That's correct, and in fact, I should bring up, that's a good point. We're going to talk about later about potential amendments to population water demand projections. New Braunfels Utilities is one of those, so it's part of that conversation right now. So there may be adjustments if I go back to NBU. There may be some adjustments to this both population and water demand sometime after February. So we'll be right back here.
Anything more on this item?
That is all I have for agenda item number 10, unless there's any other questions.
Any other questions? All right, let's go ahead then and move on to number 11. This is the hydrologic variance request to the Water Development Board.
Yes, so if you recall, sometime in the past year to 18 months, we went over our hydrologic assumptions. And we prepared a letter and submitted that to the Water Development Board, and they approved those assumptions. They look at it as a variance, so there's a certain assumptions they assume we're going to use. We document all the assumptions we're going to use, and they went through a process of looking at the assumptions versus their assumptions and see if there was any variance. And they granted, there was a few items in which they granted us a variance on. But one of the crux of what we assumed for this planning cycle was that we were going to use the TCEQ unmodified GSA WAM model and no effluent as part of that analysis for both for all existing supply analysis, for water management strategy development, and for cumulative effects. In evaluating the firm yield of Canyon, that causes a little bit of an issue, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. So let's just go over Canyon Reservoir for a minute. Canyon's permit is a little unique. It's not a firm yield type analysis. Their permit allows them to divert, GBRA to divert up to 120,000 acre feet in any given year, but there must be a maximum 5-year average of 90,000 acre feet. So this allows them to divert 120,000 acre feet in 1 year and then something less than the other 4 years, and as long as it averages 90,000 over that period, they're still complying with their permit. They have currently have contracts roughly around the 90,000 acre foot number because, again, if in an ideal world, you can contract 90,000 acre feet. We don't have massive swings in droughts and floods, and everyone uses 90,000 acre feet a year. The 5-year average ends up being 90,000 if you use 90,000 every year, so that's perfect. In the 2016 regional water planning process and subsequent state water plan, the firm yield of Canyon was calculated at 88,400 in the year 2017. In evaluating the firm yield this cycle, using the unmodified GSA WAM as downloaded from TCEQ's website and the no effluent, the draft firm yield of Canyon Reservoir by 2070 is about 75,000 acre feet, and that's a difference of about 13,400 acre feet. It's somewhat problematic to not only GBRA, but to those other water user groups in the region that rely on Canyon Reservoir as existing supply to accept a number that's 75,000 acre feet when contractually their numbers like 90,000. This affects a pretty wide range of individuals. Certainly there's some irrigators involved, some industrial, but we are talking about New Braunfels Utilities, San Antonio Water System, San Marcos, and some others as well. And I've left you out, I apologize. I'm going to go through the exhaustive list. But, so, what's the difference between last cycle and this cycle? Well, last cycle, for the evaluation of Canyon Reservoir, we used a different model. We used that old, for those of you who've been around, what we called the Region LWAM. And what the Region LWAM had was a version of the Guadalupe San Antonio WAM that had a daily simulation mode for Canyon Reservoir. So it was basically a monthly model but when it got to Canyon's permit, there was a daily step-out function that allowed Canyon to be simulated on a daily time step and then rolled back up to the monthly time step so that it can be incorporated into the rest of the model of the WAM. And a couple reasons for that daily step-out. There's some FERC regulatory, or Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requirements, FERC requirements, as part of Canyon's operation that daily step-out allows us to model, as well as a drought trigger contingency at the Spring Branch gauge. There's also requirements with Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited, which is a fishing organization that releases trout downstream of Canyon Reservoir and allows their members to go fish that area for catch non-native rainbow trouts. And some other features as well. Also, the water rights in that model are structured so that they're in accordance with how the reservoir is actually operated. And this comes into play with the Comal County Agreement. Comal County Agreement was something that GBRA struck so that they could amend their permit. And they said they would only divert up to, I believe, 28,000 acre-feet per year of lakeside, and the rest of the water would be released and then diverted elsewhere, either immediately downstream, like towards New Braunfels, or even further downstream. And this allows Comal County to protect its recreational interests in that stretch of the river. And so, from a modeling standpoint, a daily standpoint, that's what that model was. It's also important, and just real quick, and we'll get to this in a moment, but in the existing supply analysis during the last cycle, we included effluent consistent with the year 2011. During this planning cycle, using the unmodified TCQ Guadalupe San Antonio WAM, it's a monthly simulation of Canyon only. It has a rather simplistic water rights breakout. It doesn't necessarily, so the monthly model doesn't take into account the FERC, the Spring Branch drought contingency, the Guadalupe River Trout Unlimited, and other daily operations associated with the reservoir. The simplistic water right breakout does not acknowledge the 28,000 lakeside and everything else being released downstream. But then subsequently also, there was no effluent included in this cycle as directed by the planning group. And so, if you recall, the difference in firm yield in 2070, 88,400 to about 75,000, so about 13,400 acre-foot difference. There are two things going on: a monthly model versus daily model, inclusion of effluent versus non-inclusion of effluent. I did just a quick test, the easiest way possible, to just see what the effect of one or the other was, and it was easy to take the monthly model and put effluent in just to see what it was, and that makes about a 2,000 acre-foot difference there. And so one can surmise that the daily versus monthly is the remaining 11,000 or so difference. So, with all of that said, and talking with GBRA and SOLS and others as well, there's a proposal brought forward to modify our hydrologic assumptions for Canyon Reservoir only, and only for the purpose of establishing the existing supply that's reliable out of Canyon Reservoir, to use the old Region LWAM so that we can do the daily modeling of Canyon Reservoir and to get the firm yield. Still no effluent included. So we're not going to backtrack on that and change that. We're not going to include effluent. No other changes in any of the water rights. And what this would actually do would provide a firm yield that's closer in line with the actual firm yield of the reservoir and how it's actually operating. So down here in blue, it has to be verified still, but if it can be assumed that in doing so, the firm yield of Canyon, instead of being 75,000 acre feet per year this planning cycle, it would be closer to about 86,000. And that's closer in line with GBRA's contracts as well. So if you are acceptable of this type process, we would then take action today to amend our hydrologic assumptions or variance and request to use the alternate model, again, only to use the for Canyon Reservoir, existing supply only, use that daily step-out function. We submit that to Water and Board for their approval and await approval. Once we had that, we then simulate Canyon Reservoir using that daily step-out, and we revise our existing supplies, which then affects the needs of not only GBRA, but others as well, and we update the database. So that's my presentation. GBRA is here if you have any questions that I can't answer, but if I'm open to questions and answers right now. So.
Does everybody understand the proposal that's in front of us?
Suzanne, can I make a couple comments
Of
real
course,
quick?
absolutely. I just want to make sure that everyone's kind of getting it.
No, I was about to say, I mean, we asked Brian to kind of lay it out for everybody because essentially it's doing what y'all did last time. We didn't want it to seem like that this was something new or different. These debates and discussions have already been hashed out. And really, I think the main thing that I was hoping that Brian would articulate for everybody is this is better data that's available. And so this is just better data that we're using for our planning functions. This isn't, oh, let's give GBRA more water or make soils whole or anything like that. So this is just, again, replicating exactly the same methodology and the same data that was utilized last planning cycle, which is hopefully better, more specific data. And I brought Tommy, who has the real answers in case there are any hard questions.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. This is using a tool that better simulates Canyon Reservoir on a daily basis. And so in that sense, it is better data, better availability.
And if we didn't do that and left the need,
We're going to have a new water management
you'd have
strategy.
to come up with a new water management strategy to fill that or consider it not met.
Right.
And then that triggers a whole lot of other steps that would need, if we didn't need it. So, I mean, it's real water that's there that needs to be calculated into a supply that's available to meet a need. So we're not creating water, it's already there. It's just being able to calculate it in the way that's more specific to the operation.
Operations of the reservoir.
Right.
And the Canyon, I'll tell you, the Canyon permit, I've read it, it's complicated. Especially around Amendment E, I think. So once you read the original permit and amendments A through E, it gets pretty complicated. And this model, because that daily step-out function helps alleviate that and take care of all those little special conditions.
And I think the issue that we brought up before when it came to the hydrologic assumptions before when we took the action is there was a real concern about putting the effluent in. They're still keeping the effluent out, so it is reducing the overall supply by about 2,000, as he mentioned. So it's not completely going back to the other number. It is recognizing that as something that we would not put in the model in case whoever is the owner of that effluent can decide to do whatever they want with that. Because we've had that conversation here before.
And just to be clear, that 2,000 acre feet is the effluent makes a difference. Is not just effluent that's discharged above Canyon. It's basin-wide effluent. It's a holistic picture. The basin works because of priority dates and configuration of water rights and where things are. It all works holistically.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
So, clarify that, so that the 2,000 acre feet is permitted to be released into Canyon Lake or into anywhere in the water?
Anywhere in the basin.
Okay.
It's actually a lot more than 2,000 acres. It just makes a 2,000 acre foot difference in the area.
Okay, any questions? Did you have something wrong you want to say?
No. But I would, are you going to ask for a motion?
I am, as soon as I see everyone's good. Okay, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I second.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second to accept this proposal that's been put forth. Any more questions? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. All right. Thank you very much.
We'll work with Cole to create a letter to the Water Board asking for this variance. Thank you.
Makes sense. Okay, now we need to move into setting a deadline for the population and water demand projections amendment process. Again, I think Brian and talked about why we need to kind of close this off so that we can have, get decisions made and move forward with that socioeconomic report or request. And then you have a couple of other presentations in this bucket, right?
I have one, just a
Okay,
status,
one.
company
Okay.
status update at this point.
Okay,
So,
all right.
so this.
This was also in your place.
So also harking back to that needs summary I gave back under agenda item number 10, we are still in the process of reevaluating and looking at potential population and water demand projection amendments. Give you a quick overview again. We talked about this last two planning board meetings. The Water Island Board finalized their population and water demand projections. It's done in their mind right now. So at our last meeting in August, we discussed 3 different entities. We discussed Guadalupe County Steam Electric water demands at the request of CPS Energy. We discussed Cibolo, City of Cibolo, their water demands and population, and Green Valley, Special Utility District, their population water demand projections. And Regional approved submitting an amendment to the Water Island Board to get those changed. And the Water Island Board has had time to review that information, and everything seems to be good for that. At the August meeting, we kind of held up on actually doing a submittal to the Water Island Board because there were still some pending items out there, and that list seems to grow. So, additional potential changes that we're going to discuss. I'll give a summary today, but we'll probably at this point discuss our January 31st meeting. Once the tech memo was completed, it was brought to my attention that Sauls was not represented in Atascosa County, and Saul's staff made it very clear we are serving the water in Atascosa County, so why isn't it shown? And in fact, if we go back to the 2016 regional water plan, Sauls was serving population in Atascosa County. Somehow, as the transition from the old city-based, municipal-based water demand projections to utility-based, we lost that. So Sauls has brought information forward. We've talked to the water. I'll talk about that specifically in a minute, but so they would like to see some service in Atascosa County. Also during that process, the technical memorandum process, we looked at Calhoun County manufacturing, industrial component there, and just to see if there was enough water demand to meet all the various 4 to 5 entities down there doing manufacturing. There were some phone calls on that too, and I'll give a status update on that. Similarly, during the technical memorandum process, Goliad County Steam Electric looked like there may be some problems with the water demand there as well. And then 2 others on the municipal side, Canyon Lake Water Service Company and New Braunfels Utilities have some information and feel that both their population and water demand projections are under projected for the planning cycle. So I'll give you some updates on each of these. So Sauls, Atascosa County, again, current projections Sauls is shown not to serve Atascosa County. Previous plan, Sauls was there, and operationally they still are there. They didn't pull out. So the potential amendment would be to move about 475 people in 2020, growing to about 638 people in 2070 out of the Atascosa County other category into Sauls. As I mentioned, the Water Island Board's reviewed this, and it looks like it's a very doable process there. Interestingly enough, the base GPCD, the gallons per capita per day for Atascosa County other and for Sauls are within about 2 gallons. So when you move the people, the water demands don't change. It's really just almost move the population and the water demand over, and there's no increase, much increase or decrease in that water quantity. Calhoun County manufacturing. Current water development board projections show about 52,500 acre-feet of demand, pretty flat lined across the planning horizon in each decade. If you look at Dow, Cedar Grove, Ennius, and the Formosa plant, they're currently able to use up to 68,800 acre feet of water per year. So there's a little bit of concern that we're not showing that in the plan. I have been on calls with several of the folks, GBRA and LNRA and Accountants and Formosa, trying to make sure we can show that documentation. Right now, we don't have that, but the hopes is by the January 31st meeting, we will. But we'll get to the deadline here in a minute. Goliad County Steam Electric, similarly, in the state water plan from last cycle, about 17,000 acre feet of demand. This is where this is where Coleto Creek Power Station resides. It resides on Coleto Creek Reservoir, but it's actually located in Goliad County. Water to supply that reservoir and thus supply the cooling water for Coleto Creek Power Station comes from the natural runoff from Coleto Creek, but also a pump over from the Guadalupe River. So there was if you look at the 2021 projections, that the projection for steam electric demand in Goliad County is less than 2,000 acre feet. Part of the concern is that maybe the Victoria diversions are being not shown to actually meet the demand in Goliad County. So we were proposing potentially revising Goliad County Steam Electric up to what their current one unit station can potentially use in a given year, 12,500 acre feet a year. Right now, we may not have enough information to document this. I've reached out to Kevin Yannick as part of this conversation, although he's not here today. He has been talking to those at Coleto Creek Power Station, and we're still trying to get enough to the justification to do that. But, so this would be something else we would discuss in January planning review. Canyon Lake Water Service Company. This top table shows their request. Their population here is 50. They say in 2020 they'll be serving about 56,000, almost 57,000 people, growing to over 155, almost 155,000 people by 2070. They did not provide demand across the decades, but just using the GPCDs in each of these decades that the Water and Board used, I calculated the number for what the water demand would be associated with each of these. So 7,100 acre feet growing to about almost 19,000 acre feet of water. If you see down here, the top part of this other table shows the current population and water demand for Canyon Lake Water Service Company. It's being about 37,000, almost 38,000 people, growing to about 114. So you can see it's quite a tick up. If we looked at how we've done in other areas, moving people out of Comal County other into Canyon Lake's service area, that some of that can be remedied, but not in its entirety. Canyon Lake WSC has produced a tech memo detailing their estimates and some additional information. We're still working with them and the Water and Board on kind of reviewing this. The Water and Board, since our staff worker meeting, has also looked at Comal County as a whole and acknowledged that the county is growing faster than what they have in their projections, but not quite this fast. So I'm going to put this on hold for a minute. We're going to talk about New Braunfels Utilities, which is also in Comal County and Guadalupe County, but mostly in Comal County. They recently completed their 2018 Water Resources Plan and provided their executive summary to me. In that, they show their population and water demand out through about 2042 or 2043, but since we deal with decades, we'll just say through 2040. And you can see that their estimates of population in 2020 are about 95,000 people, growing up to over 200,000 by 2040, and water demand from 17,000 up to about 28,500 acre feet by 2040. I've listed the current Texas Water and Board projections here. We talked about this a little bit before, but their population being about 75,500 people, growing to 167 by 2070, and their water demand being a little over 15,000 acre feet, growing to 33,000 acre feet by 2070. So Again, you can see in terms of people, quite a bit of growth in this increases there in population, water demand as well. I did make this point earlier that they are in Comal County and Guadalupe County, at least at this time, about 82% of their service areas in Comal County, 18% in Guadalupe County. There's not really very good information on where they're growing the fastest. They may be growing faster in Guadalupe County than Comal County or vice versa, but that's where we are today. So what I'm getting at is this is a big puzzle. The boards acknowledge that Comal County is growing faster than projections, and they're willing to make those changes, but it's only a little bit. We have Comal County Other, and we have two entities within Comal County that think they're growing faster than even what the board says, so we could move people out of Comal County Other to each of these, or to one and not the other. And at this point, I don't have the information to tell you what's the best course of action.
So, question for you.
Yes.
So, water development board projections you have for MU, that's only within the UCCM, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I think, and so you mentioned the category of Comal County and other, that would just be non-certificated areas within Comal County, is that right?
It's either that or other small utilities don't make the cutoff for water users. Yes.
What about, has South CCN takes in part of Comal?
Yes, that's part of SALS. Our San Antonio Water System demands that.
Okay.
That is, when we showed that earlier, SALS, that included everything in Bear County, not stuff in Atascocita County yet, but anything that they might do in Comal County, and I think some in Medina County as well. Yeah, Mr. Tiger.
I guess one question, if we could go back to the Canyon Lake Water Supply Corporation. You know, that you're using, you know, the estimates based on the projected GPCD numbers, you know, shown, and I know that we, you know, we turn in, all municipalities and you know, entities with, you know, water supplies, turn in annual reports to Water Development Board on water usage and unaccounted for water and like that, that usually, I mean, it uses actual numbers, not the estimates of what GPCDs are.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that be useful in helping fine tune these numbers or understanding what that actually looks like currently?
So the board's default is to use 2011 as the GPCD. It was the last major dry year GPCD, and so they use that, and then they account for passive conservation occurring because of plumbing code and new growth. Project out a declining GPCD over time. So that's, I just used what they would use to come up with these numbers. The Canyon Lake Water Supply Company would like to use a different year's GPCD as their base and then project that out. We could talk to them about that, but they didn't provide me any information about their water demand. So in lieu of having any information, I used.
I was just pointing out that given the significant difference between the two, you know, values, you know, one way of seeing what that has been recently is look at the, you know, the most recently submitted, you know, water usage reports that you know, our state records. So.
Well, as it relates to GPCD, I can tell you that our water resources plan includes an aggressive conservation goal. So we're certainly not using 2011 GPCD in those after we're using our 20 GPCD. So the total demand would be a lot less than what we're forecasting. Well, population may be higher, demand would be less. GPCD, that matters.
So, I mean, what this group typically does, and what we've done in the past, and what our board likes to see, is that passive conservation gets included in the projected GPCDs outwards by the Water Board. Any active conservation strategies you guys are doing above that, we roll into the advanced water conservation strategy, water management strategy that we have, and we account for those additional savings in there. So it's still possible to take care of that.
Can you tell us the difference between a passive conservation
Sure.
strategy and an active conservation strategy?
So, well, I'd say a passive strategy is not actually a strategy, it's just something that's naturally occurring because of plumbing code changes over the years as a city or an entity grows and new construction is occurring and or remodels are occurring. Low flow toilets, high efficiency washers are typically being put in, right? Or old stuff being replaced. By virtue of that occurring in the marketplace, and because of the plumbing, you see conservation occurring, just naturally. And so that can drive down your GPCD over time without an entity actually doing anything. Active conservation is something that an entity would want to do in every year, regardless of drought or flood or average year. But it could incorporate rate structures. Just billing rates would be lower on those who use less water, and as you step up over time, a lot of times it's a scaling thing. You use up to a certain amount of water, your unit cost is this, and then as you get more, it increases. Educational programs, a toilet rebate program where the city would actually give out, spend money and buy toilet retrofits and then give those out free to the public. Same thing like shower heads, faucet heads, like retrofit type things. Maybe total toilet replacement. Other entities have done that. So it's something that the utility is actually spending money on and actively trying to do to either educate or decrease water use beyond what's actually going on in a passive sense.
So rate structuring would be active, but the natural increase in cost of water passed on to the customer might be a passive conservation.
Yeah, that could be passive. Yeah, I guess you could look at it that way. No, like a setting, an entity taking action to
Promote conservation.
acknowledge the fact that we're gonna punish, charge people more for using a lot more water would be considered an active strategy.
Thank you.
Now, the fact that they have to raise rates because of new projects is probably not that. It's not active. It's more probably passive.
If my water bill is $100 a month today, but it's
Yeah.
going to be $400 a month in 2070, I'm going to use less water.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just wondering if you would consider that active or passive. And I guess you're saying passive.
Depends on the reasoning it's going up. Is
Right.
it going up because of new projects and whatnot, or is it going up because the city's saying you're a high water user and we're going to set the rate structure so that you pay?
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'm trying to get a picture of so is NBU entertaining requests for service outside their CCN?
We are.
You do?
Yes.
Yeah, and do you have plans to expand the CCN in the future? Or?
No, we're not going to expand the CCN. We're going to serve by contract because serve by contract allows us to leverage certain conservation requirements of the road developer.
Okay.
I'm glad Mr. Bell was here because I wasn't going to answer that question. Yes.
Brian, I recognize that this is a puzzle as you indicated.
Yes.
The only concern I have is if the Water Development Board comes back and says there's more demand for, we change the numbers for MDU and Canyon Lake Water Supply, how are they going to determine, how are they going to possibly negate those other water supply, those other WUGs? And Garden Ridge is a large WUG in Comal County.
The idea is not to change Garden Ridge or any of the other recognized water user groups. The only other water user
But you
group.
stated that they recognize Comal County is growing fast. I mean, those entities are in Comal County. Garden Ridge, you have Green Valley, so, I mean, is it, I recognize it's a puzzle. I'm just kind of, what if they do come back and say, how can they go and assign it just to NBU and Canyon Lake?
Garden Ridge hasn't stepped forward. Yeah, the idea here would be, let's talk about like this next steps. The schedule that I propose here is that we set a deadline of next Friday as deadline of having any backup information, and then between next Friday and our January 31st meeting, to basically get the board, New Braunfels Utilities, Canyon Lake Water Supply, Water Service Company together. Let's figure this out. What we can live with, given that the board gives us hard numbers of what we can do. How much, if any, gets borrowed out of Comal County Other to help meet the needs of Canyon Lake and New Braunfels Utilities, and then present that at the January 31st planning group meeting for your consideration and amendments. As well as the stalls at Escalante County, anything we would do with Calhoun County Industrial, and anything we would do with Goliad Steam Electric. So my plan is not to take any action on those 5 today, but to set a deadline of next Friday is let's get the data and be done. Let's have a meeting sometime in November or December amongst everyone, figure out the best course of action and bring a proposal to you in January.
Is everyone, yes, Steve?
I just want to elaborate on the process a little bit more. Taking this type of action by the planning group requires a special 14-day posting period. When we met as staff work group, we had intended to post. We met on Tuesday, and we should have posted like that Thursday, and it got by us. But as you can see, we really didn't have enough information for the planning group to make a decision. So, moving this to the January 31st meeting would allow that information to be developed and come back to the planning group with a more definitive proposal for y'all to consider. And so what we would do then is we would have to post, we don't have to post the notice of the whole meeting, we just have to post a notice that the planning group will be considering a potential amendment to the population and water demand projections. And we would have to post that notice 14 days before January 31st.
And I'll add to that for a minute. We've talked to the Water on Board. At that January 31st meeting, this group could take action on one or all or some subset of those proposals. The Water on Board has assured us that, given if we do all our pre-homework, if we were to approve this on the 31st, that then they would have time to finalize everything, get it through their board, update the database before that May 31st deadline so that they can run the socioeconomic impacts. So that would include the 3 amendments you've already approved, plus any additional ones you would do January 31st. And so that we can still fit this in the timeline to make sure we capture that in that socioeconomic needs analysis.
So Brian, let me ask you a question, because essentially if we make this November 9th, if we vote on this process, we are closing down any more applications of people asking for us to look at any kind of changes. And I guess in the spirit of the conversation that Humberto was just having, would it be helpful, I know they haven't put any information in, but when you're talking about this Comal County issue, should you bring some of those other WUGs or other potentially impacted groups together? Because if it is this balance of not stealing, but moving from here and doing this, and it could affect them. And if they're out of the conversation, they may not be aware of all of this happening. And I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to get all of them in the room at the same time, just to say, this is what's happening, this is how we're going to have to manage this between all these small groups that may not be aware of all of this.
Solace partially serves in Comal County, Green Valley does as well, and maybe some others. Garden Ridge is within Comal County. I can tell you, in 5 cycles, I've never heard from anyone from Garden Ridge. This is usually part of the planning process.
But at least if we reach out.
We've reached out, and I've never heard anything back. Not specific to this issue, but every time we do a survey and we ask for input.
I understand that, but
we can try again.
Can we just make one more attempt to say, look, we're talking about Comal County. If you want to come to the meeting, this is the day of the meeting. If you don't come, you have the opportunity. And maybe Humberto, you can help us in your capacity to reach out to your colleagues and see if there's some way that we can at least get them at the table. I just would hate for us to be in a situation where, we didn't take one more opportunity just to show that we're trying. Would you at least talk to them and see? Yes.
Just a quick question, I guess, on procedure. Once we adopt our regional water plan, and let's say one of these entities like, holy crap, had a lot of growth, we want to go for SWIFT, we're not showing a need.
Exactly.
So is there an amendment process once the state water plan is adopted to come and update after we have the 2020 census to update the population projections? So Garden Ridge can, after 10 years, finally get involved with either RWA, or are they not a member of RWA?
Garden Ridge?
No. Okay. But some of those smaller groups that are part of your organization, is that a part of the process that's available to them once the state water plan is adopted on population?
The group can amend the regional water plan at any time it chooses, given sufficient information. And then that regionally approved amendment would be forwarded to the Water Development Board, and then they would take, the appropriate action to amend the state water plan. If
I just don't think we have the data available, and no offense, I don't think anyone's
No.
crystal ball is better than anybody else's in
No,
this
of
room.
course
And the only thing that I would add, just so the planning group kind of gets the full picture here, because given the information that Brian has presented, I think we're still going to find a situation in Comal County where we're not going to be able to get the quote demands officially up to where, you know, the individual utilities feel that their needs are going to be met. So the planning group can still make a decision to include water management strategies, and the term we've always used through the various planning cycles is management supply. And the purpose of that management supply is supplies over and above the exact number of need, so that in case the project doesn't make because of permitting or environmental concerns, or there's been some, you know, change in the rate of growth and all of those various reasons. So the planning group still has that mechanism available to them. So it's not like we can't do anything if we don't get the number exactly right. What we need to do.
And we talked about that as part of our guiding principles. Tim, I think, is in charge of that. So, yes.
I'd also just like to add that we're in an off-census planning cycle, so next planning cycle, these numbers may be adjusted upwards in time for 2026. So the numbers may be different next planning cycle.
Right.
We can, to Steve's point, we can always overplan. We can always add additional supplies. I just pulled up the list of entities within Comal County. It includes the ones we talked about, Clearwater Estates as well, Crystal Clear, Garden Ridge, Green Valley, we talked about KT Water Development, Shirts, I forgot Shirts, I don't know why. Fair Oaks Ranch, Selma, Water Services Inc. That's it. So, I will.
Within that list, there's two entities that belong to Kansas Regional.
That's true.
You know, I'm, just speaking on behalf of all the other entities that could possibly be impacted, and going back to Jonathan's point, and that's a valid point. You know, at some point, you start realizing you messed up and you need to get a take on how do you do that.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching out for these entities that, you send the service and have responded.
Right.
We make sure, advocate on their behalf.
Well,
This
since
is truly
they-
a water plan.
Sorry.
But this truly is a water plan for
Yeah.
the region, and more participation, the better.
I mean, obviously you have the big players.
Right.
You know that, but just one more time.
Yeah,
Tell
no,
them
no.
the meeting scheduled, schedule it around the people that you know, and then just say, we're meeting.
Yeah.
Please, and if we can try to get them there, that would be awesome. Just to make sure that you're not gonna get somebody flying in at the last minute. We wanna try to get it all together at the same time. Is that helpful?
We will do.
All right, any other questions on this item? So we're gonna have to take action here do you want an official action, or can we do this by consensus? Does somebody need an action on this one?
Well, I think what Brian is needing and for the planning group to consider is to give some certainty that after this proposed date, November 9th, that we're, if someone comes in, we're just not gonna have time to deal with it.
That's right.
Are you gonna need a post notice 2 weeks before January 31st? So we can take
Yeah,
action at
yes,
that
we'll
point?
do the
Yeah, we will
14-day
do
notice.
that.
But I'm just saying, so I'm kind of backing up with.
Yes, absolutely.
It's more, Brian's given this date of November 9th so that he has enough time to work with the entities and Water Development Board so that we can come back to the planning group with some definitive proposal for the planning group to consider. The notice is just so that we give adequate notice to the public that the planning group is going to consider that potential change. So that's the reason for requesting an action.
Right.
So if you want to do it by consensus or by formal motion, we will note that, and that will be the date that we're going to tell people.
Okay. So is there any concerns about setting this deadline of November the 9th for getting the data and then not taking any more requests for changes to these demand projections, population and demand projections? Any concerns about closing that off? All right. Then hearing none, then we are adopting this schedule, and the November 9th deadline will hold. Okay? Everybody all right with that? I'm not hearing any objection. Okay. So please note that that was approved.
Thank you.
All right. Next is So this is posting notice, oh, this is for the, I guess, Cole, do you want to go over this item about?
Yeah.
It's going to be a combination between you and Brian going over some of the water strategies, water management strategies that are going to be in the first group of action and work, technical work by the consultant.
Okay, so I'll let Brian talk about the projects. The particular language in the agenda is Water Development Board language requires us to amend our contract with the Water Development Board and our contract with Black and Beach so that we can go ahead and proceed on using those funds to complete the task. So these projects that, the scopes of work that Brian's going to go over were actually presented to the group last week. Brian's developed scopes of work. We'll take action today to consider these, and after that, we'll have to solicit, or we have to submit a request to the Water Development Board to get a notice to proceed so that we can go ahead and make those contracts.
Right. So we're really starting now the technical evaluation of water management strategies for the next plan. So this is the first group of those strategies. Remember, all of those that have been around a while, there's several strategies that we start to look at that the water user groups bring forward, and as well as the technical consultants trying to evaluate through the recipe that's given by the Water Development Board as to how these analyses need to be done. The consultant needs to put together a scope of work and a cost associated with that. And then we have to make sure that the Water Development Board brings forward those funds in order to get that work done. So we're going to do this in several blocks. I think this is the first block, and Brian can talk to you about the process that we're going to go through.
So just as a reminder, we talked about this last time you were meeting, kind of put this process in place where I would bring you multiple water management strategies at a given meeting to then authorize me to go develop scope and fee for those, come back at the next meeting and present those scopes and fees for your approval to begin this process of amending our contracts both between Black Beach and Sarah and the Water Board, so that we can take the block of money that has been set aside for water management strategy and start digging it up to which ones and how much. So what I'm going to talk about under agenda item number 13 is block 1. If you recall, the last planning meeting, I think there were 11 that we talked about. You said, great, Brian, go off, develop a scope and fee for that, bring it back to us in November, and let's discuss. So, while I'm here, if you are to approve one or all 11 of these today, we will then initiate that light blue process there where we submit to the Water Board and then contracts and they approve it, and then we can start working on that. And it's not necessarily these 11 we present at the next meeting, and we will present them at the proper time as they are developed. Some of them we might need more time on. Others we might want to wait until later to do, so we have the most up-to-date information. Others we can start on right away. Just want to make that point. So, in your presentation materials, there's a wordish looking document that has, it looks like this at the top. Water Management Strategy Evaluations, Block 1, Scope and Key Estimates, draft October 15, 2018. Advanced Water Conservation, we've spoken about this already. This is a water management strategy we've had in each of the last planning cycles. It is, again, looking at active strategies that utilities are doing to try to increase their conservation above what's passively occurring due to plumbing code and natural development of growth and replacement of old fixtures. It's important to note that this planning group in the past has taken a strategy of setting this up as a goal, advanced water conservation goal, and in doing so, it's a formula calculation. If it starts with what the entity's GPCD is, and looks at if it's above 140 GPCD as one of the goals, we would decrease that GPCD, that gallons per capita per day use, down by 1% per year until 140 gallons per capita per day is reached. And then after that fact, continue to decrease it at 0.25% per year. So, it, you know, you look like this, and then it flattens out a little bit. It's still recognizing conservation can occur beyond 140 gallons per capita. If an entity starts out already below 140, we would just use that 0.25%. And again, we've looked at this as a goal, something to strive for each entity without prescribing specific strategies. But we do list about 15 best management practices, BMPs, as typical ways that they could go about doing that. And it's up to the individual entity to choose which ones they would want to implement to try to achieve that goal. In the last planning cycle, we actually had one entity, San Antonio Water System, have a specific strategy they were looking at, and we included information about that. We're open to that again this cycle too. So the default would be this formulaic method. But if an entity has specific strategies they want to implement, such as Sol's AMI program, and I know there's others that are looking at AMIs and other things too, they can bring that information to us. We can consider that. In this cycle, as Ms. McCoy mentioned earlier, the Water and Electric Board has developed a water conservation tool that will allow us, on those specific strategies, to look at if an entity implemented strategy A or strategy C or whatever, how much water savings could occur based on where they are now, where they could go forward. And so the proposal here is to, again, use the default value where we don't know anything, but for those entities that bring stuff forward to us, we would then try to utilize the Water and Electric Board's tool and account for actual water savings for that specific strategy. And it's estimated that we would do this for all municipal water user groups across the region, of which there's about 132, I think. And it's going to cost about $15,000 in fee to do so. Any questions about advanced water conservation and how we'll go about that? Awesome.
Brian?
Yes.
That 140 gallons per day is per meter?
It's per person.
Per person. So
Gallons
there's-
per capita per person, yeah. So, and so if a household has 3 people, you take 140 times 3, and that would be that much per meter, basically. In a similar fashion, well, we've done calculations in the past looking at drought management strategy. I'm going to differentiate between, we've talked about water conservation, both passive and active, or what we call advanced, already. Differentiating drought management is also water savings. It's not necessarily creating water, it's water savings. But it's only for strategies that you would implement during drought years. So if it's an average year or a flood, very wet year, these strategies typically don't get implemented. A lot of times this would be an entity saying, okay, well, because we're in drought stage 2, we need to go to once a week lawn watering. When we go to drought stage 3, now it's once every 2 weeks or something. No car washing except for on the weekends or something. So those kind of things that you implement during extremely dry drought periods to try to save additional water. In the past, for all municipal water user groups that have needs in the first decade, in this case 2020, we would look at calculating a drought management number. Again, and Ms. McCoy did not mention this, but the Water and Electric Board is developing a tool that will help account for what the estimated savings due to drought management strategies would be. That tool is due out late next year once they have done their socioeconomic impacts of not meeting needs analysis, because it's going to roll into this tool as well. And so what we're proposing is to use that tool where we can and estimate for municipal WUGs with needs in 2020 how much could be saved with drought management structures. And this is similar to what we did in the 2016 planning cycle. We'll document the costs and estimated potential water savings in our water management strategy, and we estimate that'll be about $10,000. Any questions? Okay. Edwards Transfers is a strategy that is a holdover from previous plans as well, and really acknowledges that there is not quite a heavy market anymore as it used to be, but because the Edwards Aquifer Habitat Conservation Plan, but there is still a market out there for willing sellers and willing buyers to enter an agreement to transfer Edwards permits between each other. oftentimes, I think in the last cycle, we really limited that to entities that were fully on the Edwards Aquifer in areas where there weren't other strategies, and the municipal entities would then look to buy irrigation water rights and convert them to municipal use within their given county. And that's kind of what we propose to use this time for as well. So we look at the actual transfer, any potential infrastructure upgrades necessary to actually have access to that water as well. So, and that'd be summarized in the water management strategy evaluation. Yes, Mr. Tiger?
I guess the only question I would have in relation to that is the distinction of having Edwards as a sole source of water, as there are more entities that are conjunctive users now than there used to be. And I mean, the Edwards rules are not promulgated the same way to focus on transfers being relegated only to sole source Edwards users. It may make sense to think about broadening that to include water supplies that choose to use that.
We could eliminate the sole source part of it. Anyone want to discuss or comment? Is that Mr. Tiger? Is everyone okay with that? Broadening?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Everybody's diversifying.
We'll do strike through here, and I'll just make that edit later. Okay. So, really, what we're doing with this is summarizing that information, and so it's not a big cost item. It's about $5,000 just to summarize that this is occurring and that these entities are likely to implement that. So.
And is that, do you take into, I'm sorry
Yeah.
for the late response on this, but do you take into consideration then how the Habitat Conservation Plan is, because they are doing some of this as part of that, this willing sellers, willing buyers is part of the transfer of irrigation to the Habitat Conservation Plan, like the VISPO, and how do you calculate that? This is outside of that?
This is outside of that. This I think in my discussions with the AA, we're going to assume this planning cycle that the EAHCP is fully implemented. So
Okay.
that is the base at which we're starting.
So this would be outside of that if there's people,
Yeah.
if there was still a market left?
Yeah.
after
This is
that.
for, I don't think we're getting to Uvalde, let's say. And City of Uvalde has a lot of growth happening, but they can't be supported by their Edwards, and they maybe have looked at other strategies, but it's more beneficial or more cost effective to purchase maybe a Uvalde irrigation Edwards permit and transfer it. So.
Okay, got it.
Question?
Well, yeah, so does this, a contested item in Uvalde with the change of how much water has to be tied to the land, so does this account for that change?
I believe in the past, when we're doing this evaluation, to look at what can be transferred versus what has to stay with the land, because I think it's about 50%. So yeah, we're only looking at transferring what can be transferred. So there's a limit on what's capable of them getting. So, yes, that's part of the consideration. Okay. Local groundwater. This is a culmination of a lot of strategies detailed in one write-up. And what this is groundwater for the sole source folks. This is not necessarily Edwards. It could be Trinity, Gulf Coast, Carrizo. Those entities that they're using the Carrizo Wilcox as their sole source, and the most likely thing they're going to do is drill another well and get it permitted and meet their needs. And generally, this occurs for your smaller municipalities that are out there on their own, and there's not an economic way to develop a new surface water supply or a regional approach, and typically they're looking at maybe adding a well in 20 years and another well maybe in 40 years. So this process or this water management documents like where we would use that, in which aquifer, how many wells, how much that would cost for them, and what the process would be for them to do that. for all the entities that fall under this. But we do have specific information enough that if that entity wants to go to the Water Board and get SWIFT funding, that the information is available within this one write-up. You'll have a specific section for them, so if they get points.
Yes.
Yes.
What about a small water supply corporation like Springs Hill that has multiple sources but would be interested in identifying whether additional groundwater is an option? Would they be evaluated as part of this, or?
Not as part of this. We would probably include that as a separate water management strategy for them. They are, they are a bigger entity. They're in terms of certainly sort of in terms of geography as well. But and they do have multiple sources of water. I think we would probably have a specific strategy for them when we have in the past. When looking at Springs Hill. In the past, we've used this for cities like Castroville, cities like Kennedy, Karnes City, entities, Runge, I think, folks like that. Okay. Local Carrizo conversions is one similar to the Edwards, where again, an entity in conjunction with the local groundwater strategy, there might be something permittable that they need to go out and buy out an irrigator and then transfer that over. So that an entity such as the ones I just described could still develop that well without getting a brand new permit. They would use the local groundwater strategy along with the local Carrizo conversions to then transfer that from one use type to another. I should mention the local groundwater, we estimate it's about 20,000, because there are some calculations and some detailed information needs to go on there about the number of wells, the timing of those wells, the cost associated, how deep, how much quantity, et cetera, for each of these entities. So that is a bigger task, $20,000 for that. Local Carrizo conversions, again, like Edwards, is relatively small, just kind of documenting that process, about $5,000.
And in the local groundwater, do you use the MAG?
We do use the MAG. We use the MAG for anything groundwater related.
Okay.
So that's where you may not be able to go out and get a new permit is because it's MAG restricted. Yeah. Okay. Moving on, surface water rights. I'm going to tackle kind of both surface water rights and balancing storage together. There's some similarities there, but they're different. I'll talk about the differences. They are a relatively small task because we're documenting the planning group's acknowledgement that this happens. But so surface water rights really is where, again, looking at the transfer of existing surface water rights from one entity to another, where that takes a TCQ process. And Victoria has used this in the past. Victoria has been out and bought other water rights, surface water rights, and then gone through a process where they may have to either change the use type or the diversion location. That triggers a TCQ amendment process. Well, this strategy allows folks like Victoria and others who have done this, and maybe Texas State is doing this, and maybe San Marcos, I don't know. And I know Canyon Regional has done this as well too. That triggers a process by which this acknowledges the fact that happens in the plan, and the planning group is supportive of utilizing those existing resources to the best ability possible. What it does not cover is an entity buying a water right, surface water right, and amending that water right to divert more water or increase the maximum instantaneous diversion rate. It's more of the transfer of title to name, transfer of use type, change of use type, and change of location to make that an easier transition for them at TCQ. They can say, are you consistent with the regional water plan? They can point to this strategy and say yes. In a similar fashion, balancing storage is like that as well, where entities are now potentially accessing water from further and further away, minimize pipeline costs. They want to deliver that water uniformly, but they may need to, because of actual use in the city, want to have some storage by their water treatment plant to account for the daily fluctuations or monthly fluctuations in water use. And so balancing that, on the raw water side of a water treatment plant, that requires that storage that they may have to get a permit through TCQ. This strategy acknowledges that happens and is supportive of that action so that entities can save money in the long run by not having oversized pipes, but build some terminal storage and allow that balancing to occur. Both these strategies are relatively small. We're documenting that process, and the planning group supported that, those type of initiatives, because they do save money in the long haul and better utilize existing resources. So they're both about $5,000 of our time. I should mention, the cost assessment, the fee estimate is inclusive of Black and Beech's effort as well as our subconsultants. So groundwater strategies would be Daniel Stevens and Associates would be helping, and on all strategies in which there's environmental analysis, SCBCA would be involved as well. So, any questions so far? All right, moving on. Facilities expansion. We would like to allocate about $10,000 to do that. This strategy in the past, again, is similar to those that culminate information from a bunch of different entities, but what we're looking at is facilities expansion that better utilize future projects or existing projects. This can be a water treatment plant expansion, this can be maybe an integration pipeline that is not tied to one specific strategy, but maybe multiple strategies, where San Antonio, for example, San Antonio Water System, the previous cycle had multiple strategies all coming to South Bexar County. They had the Western Integrated Pipeline that was really it's not fair to tie that to one of 4 or 5 different strategies, but really it's usually utilize all that water that's available down there. And so it's an infrastructure expansion, facility expansion there. So what we do in this strategy is we document all those that we know about, and we learn about through this process when we talk to the various water user groups and wholesale water providers. We get information about what is actually being asked in terms of construction, expansion, whatnot, how much that's going to cost, timeline for it, the entity, and again, this allows them to go to the Water Development Board and seek funding to help with those expansions. But this does not include distribution system improvements or anything on the treated water side of things. The distribution side of things. It can be treated water, but it would have to be large scale stuff. Okay. And several of you have already brought things forward to me. I know Canyon Regional Water Authority has, and some others as well. Recycled water strategies. Sometimes we say reuse or reclaimed water. In the context of regional planning, we're going to just call it all recycled water. Is a strategy in which an entity seeks to use its own or someone else's treated effluent to meet or offset potable water demands. So it can be used as a non-potable use, but that they don't have to use their potable water necessarily to meet that non-potable use anymore. And it can also be inclusive of potable use. This can be either direct or indirect. This strategy encapsulates all of that. And again, it's multiple entities in which we have subsections that talk about the specific strategy for each of those. So in the last planning cycle, we talked about what San Antonio River Authority, for example, had, what San Antonio Water System, what San Marcos had planned. Even folks like CCMA, Civil Creek Municipal Authority, who is a regional wastewater treatment entity. We detail the information that they have about their future use of recycled water and how they may go about that in terms of facilities, cost, and we document whether it's direct, indirect, potable, non-potable, and all the legal kind of ramifications of all that, and regulatory and permitting requirements. So, this is a little bigger task because we're kind of summarizing the difference between all the different types of reuse, but then we're also gathering information from those entities and trying to summarize that as well in subsections. So it'd be one water main strategy with multiple subsections. Okay, 2 more for you today. Expanded local CREZO for Sauls. Sauls is in a good position now where they have several projects online, including their local CREZO groundwater, the Brackish Wilcox, their regional CREZO. They're about to bring Vista Ridge online. Doesn't quite meet their needs all the way to the end of the timeline. They are looking to expand local CREZO at some point down the timeline. This documents that they currently are using about almost 10,000 acre-feet of water from the CREZO aquifer in Southern Bexar County. This looks to expand it by adding almost 30,000 acre-feet of CREZO groundwater freeze aquifer for groundwater in southern Gray County. Our plan here is to get the latest, greatest information from SAWS and their consultants about, and engineers about what's planned, how that is looked into phases, what infrastructure is required, the quantities of water, when they would come online, and basically cost that according to the Water and Health Board using the costing tool, their rules and guidance, and then develop water management strategy to talk about that specific project. About 12,500 allocated for that one. And then finally, the expanded brackish groundwater is very similar to what I just said for SAWS in Southern Gray County. They have a brackish Wilcox well field. Currently about 13,400. They're looking to add another 20,000 at some point in the future, either all at once or in stages. And we will work with them using the latest, greatest information they have to develop a cost estimate, write up a strategy, and all the environmental impacts. And timing and the water and how much. So we would document that in a water management strategy. Again, 12,500. So if you take these 11 and add them all up, we have a total budget for evaluating water management strategies as a whole of about $373,000. This block one, these 11 strategies total up to $112,500, which is about 30% of the overall budget. It leaves about almost 261,000 remaining for us to allocate later. So with that, what we're looking for today is approval of all or a subset of these water management strategies that you want to spend this amount of money and this analysis on to be evaluated, and approval for Black Nations Sanitary Authority to submit this to the Water and Health Board and start the end of the process.
And please understand, by taking this action today, it does not mean that you are approving this strategy for any other purposes other than evaluation at this point in time. For them to do the work, to bring that information to you. There are still many other opportunities for us to review them, determine how this is applicable to the plan, if it's even going to go in the plan. There's a lot of other steps that need to take place. This is strictly doing the technical analysis of the strategy to bring it forward for your future consideration.
So you need one.
Yeah, that's right. Gives you the data that you need.
I move to approve item 13.
All right.
I'll
Okay, so
second.
Berto made the motion, Glenn seconded. All those in favor of moving forward with this, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign? All right, great. Thank you. Move that forward. All right, I'm going to do a time check. It is 1:45 noon.
Okay.
We are moving through this pretty quickly,
More than I thought, yes.
faster than the staff work group.
Yeah.
So awesome. So I just want to do a time check. We can push through because we only have two more items really, but I don't know how long those other items are. So can we push through? Or
I need 15 to 20 minutes, probably tops.
Okay. Is everyone all right with pushing through? Okay. Then let's push on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, back to our schedule. We talked about block one, and I brought a list to you in August, and between August and now, I've developed a scope and fee for that. You all just approved block one, so we will initiate that process where we work with the Water and Health Board to get notice to proceed and officially allocate those funds. But today, I want to talk about block two as well. I want to give you another list of strategies. At our last planning group meeting, I mentioned that I would work with all the other entities and try to get a good handle on how many more water management strategies we might have. And I thought about breaking that list up into this time and next time, but instead I just brought all 19 to you today. Partially because I want to make sure we have time in January, it says February, but actually the end of January, for any other strategies still to come up. And then, not to say if we don't get them in January, we can't do another water management strategy evaluation, but let's knock out as many as possible now, and then maybe January will be just a small subset of anything left. And again, if something comes along in May and we need to take some action on that, we can. But anyway, I brought you 19. We can talk about them. This is an exhaustive list. of what I know at this point. I've talked with GBRA, I've talked with Alliance Regional, I've talked with Canyon Regional, I've talked to Cipolo Valley and Shirt Seguin, local government corporations, NBU, and Victoria, and then I talked to SS Water Supply Corporation as well. And a lot of this is based on the previous plan and things that have either changed or just being pulled forward from that previous plan. So, I'll go through these relatively quickly. If you have questions, please feel free to stop me. And a lot of the representatives of these entities are here today, so if there's something you want to ask that I don't know, I'll be making it help fill it out. But I have a pretty good sense of each of these. The first one is Alliance Regional Water Authority and GBRA conjunctively working together on what we're just dubbing the Phase 1 project. This is development of 15,000 acre feet for Alliance and 15,000 acre feet for GBRA out of the Caldwell, Guadalupe County areas. Carrizo Aquifer Water, separate from well fields and facilities, joining together, common pipelines, common distribution to about, if I remember, about 7 different entities. So it's a regional project. Some of you may know that I think GBRA made a press release, and others have seen the news. They agreed to work together and move forward. But it's in all total, it's about 30,000 acre feet of water to serve, like I said, about 7 different entities, and some sub entities off of those, but mainly 7 entities. Yes, sir.
All of these are pre-scope, which means that it's just an idea in somebody's mind right now? Or has there been some engineering?
So each of these 19 here it varies. Some of them, and when I come back with the fee and scope estimate, you'll see probably the difference. Some of them have a lot of information already done. They have consultants working on them, and I will be relying on the entity to provide their consultant and engineers information so that I can quickly develop the water management strategy. Others are just concepts in people's mind, an entity's mind that they want to evaluate and look forward. So that will take a little more effort. And so, and it's not. So you'll see the fee is not necessarily tied to the size of the project necessarily. It's more tied to the effort that the entity has already developed at this point, right? For this first one, for example, I'll get a lot of information from Alliance and GBRA, and they'll provide that to me. They both have program managers in place. They both have well field designers in place, water treatment plant designers, pipeline designers all in place. So they'll be bringing all that information to me and providing it to me. So the second one would be, what's the next phase for Alliance after this project? Because eventually they'd like to get to a project that is around 36,000 acre feet. So this is the number one is about 15 of that 36. So what's the next step? That's phase 2. And again, phase 1 will have a lot of information. Phase 2 will have some, but not quite as much. Right? Graham Moore's here. And then phase 3 would be a subsequent amount above that. Again, just working with the same entities, Alliance for Regional Water Alliances, the Water Authority. But looking down the timeline, phase 1's in the near term, phase 2's down the line, phase 3's even further out. In a similar fashion, GBRA has a mid-basin phase 2 that they want to evaluate. What do they do after that first 15,000 of groundwater? They have still the mid-basin permit lingering out there that they may want to look at bringing in surface water and doing conjunctive use, or ASR with it, or whatnot. So that's what GBRA mid-basin phase 2 is. If you think phase 1 is part of that number 1, their phase 2 could be on its own, or it could be, things go well with the Alliance, they might decide to continue work forward and develop projects there. But initially, we'll keep it separate. GBRA has a lower basin storage project where they would look seeking to add additional storage at the lower basin off their canal to firm up some of their canal water rights. GBRA Lower Basin water right is a subsequent application for a new appropriation down there that could or could not have storage as well to then use that water for any number of reasons. Victoria County Steam Electric project would be to meet GBRA and others to meet steam electric demands in Victoria County. Canyon Regional Water Authority as well as Ranch Phase 3. Since our last cycle, Phase 2 is now online, but down the line they may need to add a Phase 3. So what's the next step of that? It's a groundwater project, just so you know, for those who are not familiar with Wells Ranch. Their Siesta project is on Cibolo Creek. It's a combination of surface water runoff and existing and future water rights, but also being backed up by indirect effluent returns. So there's that project on the timeline as well. Cibolo Valley Local Government Corporation project, Creaser project, that's the one we had in the last plan, 10,000 acre feet out of Wilson County to serve Cibolo and Schertz, if I recall. Schertz Local Government Corporation expanded Carrizo project in Guadalupe County. Would be an expansion of their existing project to meet the needs of not only Schertz Seguin, but other customers that have started using that. I believe Universal City and some others are buying water from Schertz Seguin at this point. And in Schertz Seguin, Brackish Wilcox project would be a new project in Gonzales County looking at Brackish Wilcox groundwater. New Braunfels Utility has an ASR project that they had in the last plan, and they're looking to keep that in the plan this cycle. Although that's changed, the configuration that's changed somewhat, they still want to have an ASR project available in the plan. They have a Trinity Wellfield project already up and running. They're looking at the expansion of that, their Wellfield project, at some point in the future. And New Braunfels Utilities and the City of Seguin are working together to transfer some water from Seguin to New Braunfels Utilities. We want to make sure we document that in here as well. Victoria County had an ASR project in the last cycle, which is carrying that forward. Also looking to bank water available, I believe river water, store it in the groundwater, store it in the aquifer for subsequent reuse or subsequent use later. I think we want to carry this forward where we document the fact that Victoria has the ability to do the groundwater surface water exchange. For those of you who don't remember, Victoria has a permit, well, has many permits, but the main one is 20,000 acre feet with a 1993 card. It's generally pretty junior. During drought, typically they would be cut off from using surface water and have to rely on groundwater and increase their groundwater diversions. They have worked with TCQ to come to an agreement so that they can continue to use surface water, but would use the groundwater to offset their diversions from the river, so that it's not, and I believe it's even greater than 1-to-1. This way, they don't have to change the system over, changing their treatment process or flush their system. It actually saves time and money to do so. And the benefit here is that they're maybe diverting, if they're diverting 100 acre feet out of a river, they're putting, I think, 110 back. No, not anymore.
1-for-1.
Oh, it is 1-for-1. Sorry, but so there's a net zero effect basically. Doesn't impact folks downstream. And then Uvalde County, the City of Uvalde had an ASR project last time. Carry that forward, we're looking at using water out of some chalk and feed of limestone and storing that in Carrizo Aquifer for subsequent use later when there's water available in the chalk and Vita, and then making a firm supply. And then SS Water Supply Corporation has their own existing Carrizo wells, but they're looking at developing 1 MGD of brackish groundwater at some point in Wilcox. So that's the 19 strategies. In addition to the 11 we've already talked about, to shoot you 30 strategies. With your approval today, I will go back and develop scopes and fees for each of these, and you'll have another opportunity in January 31st to then, like you say with those 11, approve some, or all of these 19 to then allocate funds and move forward for evaluation in the spring cycle. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification. When you provide scopes and fees, are these estimates or are these fixed fees?
So we are fixed on that $373,000 a month. I am trying to allocate portions of that to that, and so I won't say they're fixed, but it behooves me to stay within that budget, because as we add more and more strategies, we're going to close in on that 373, and we can't go over that. So.
But you're fixed to the amendment.
I'm fixed to the amendment.
If the first amendment that we just approved, that bottom line.
I think from the water hosting point, we're just fixed to the 373,000
Oh, okay.
for the whole amount. So and since these are
112
estimates for each one of these, but
112 we just approved.
Yeah.
Is that when you do all this work, it's gonna be 112, or it could be a little more, or it could be a little less?
could be a little more, could be a little less,
Okay.
but it's gonna be around 112.
Got it.
Yeah, and just to maybe clarify a little bit more, to Brian's point, the 370 some odd thousand is the total. Because we're doing this in 2 to 3 meetings, we're breaking it up in chunks. So he does have some latitude, like if he said one was gonna be 5,000, but he spends 5,200. You know, one other strategy, he's gonna have to spend 4,800 on to make it up. And at some point, we'll have all of that funding obligated, and then the bottom line is that 370 some odd thousand.
And to clarify that too, these are estimates because for some of these strategies, I just don't know what the entity has done to the school. For example, NDU may give me a lot of information, they may give me very little information. I'm gonna try to understand how much information between now and January, but even after January, that could change. So that I might not actually start evaluating it until August, and they may develop a lot more information, and suddenly we're saving money. So it's a kind of an ongoing process. But the overall target is you've got a certain amount of money to evaluate strategies and try to list it.
And I'll also clarify that the contract amendment that we issued with this notice to proceed on the tax 5-day funds, it is broken up by each of these individual scopes of work. So the funding is kind of tied to that. Changes.
Do I have to invoice for every single one of these? Not last time.
Or maybe it's just,
We'll talk about it. Last cycle, we didn't have to like invoice for advanced water conservation. We spent.
I think it's when we review your invoices.
Okay. Anyway.
All right.
That's all.
So, this, you need action to go forward and be able to.
Permission, yeah.
So consensus. Is there any concerns about, Brian moving forward with developing scopes and fees for this block number 2? Any concerns? Again, it'll come back to us at the next meeting for action. All right, so move forward on that.
And so from now until January, we'll develop a scope on these 19, and assume you approve all 19, we'll have 30 strategies at that point that will serve the need, most of the needs in the region. We will have anything that is brought forward, or we work with folks and learn about. I'll bring another block to you in January, assuming there are some, and then we'll, for the most part, stop allocating funds at that point. But we'll still have some in reserve, and if, like I said, if an entity comes forward late in the game and there's time and money still available, we can still work with them to get it into the project, into the strip end of the plan, So it's not like February is an end all be all, but we'd like to be mostly complete with the water management strategies by February. Okay. Thanks, guys. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Got a lot of work done. All right, so moving next to possible items for the Regional meeting in January. So we've already discussed the population water demand projections, and then the action for the Water Development Board to do the socioeconomic study once we've finalized all the population and water demand projections. We're going to have block 2 of the scopes and fees, maybe a water management strategy, potentially, Brian, maybe?
Maybe, it's possible.
Okay, you're gonna be busy with water demand projections, maybe not.
So, when I think about the list we did, it's possible, for example, the last 2 we talked about, the SALS ones, assuming they're not in the process of developing new information, and what they have today is the most they might have.
Okay.
We could present those. The others are large enough, and we want to get the latest information, so we'll probably wait until later on the cycle.
Okay.
Not talking.
And I do know in January we have officer elections again. That comes up every year. So any of you interested in officer positions, please let us know and we can discuss that. What else am I missing?
The only other thing I have is block 3 of Ryan.
Okay. Okay, so if he has a third block of any water management strategies to bring forward to develop scopes and fees on. Anything else that anyone knows about?
Worst Fest starts tomorrow.
Oh. On Day of the Dead, interesting. There's a tie-in there. Any other public comment that anyone would like to share?
I'd like to announce 2 upcoming Texas Water Symposium. The first is next Thursday evening in Kerrville. It'll be a direct discharge of effluent water symposium. It'll include representatives from GBRA, the Nueces River Authority, and will be moderated by somebody from Texas Parks and Wildlife. On the 15th in the evening in San Marcos at Texas State University, there'll be a flooding Texas Water Symposium. The Water Board will have a representative of San Antonio River Authority, USGS, and Robert Rivard will be moderating that. And I brought calendars. I was able to sneak about 20 out of the warehouse, so you guys help yourselves on the way out.
Yeah, this beautiful calendars. Any other public comment? Any other comments by the planning group members?
Suzanne, we don't have to redo our online training again, do we?
No, and one thing I was going to mention to Mitch, and you can talk to Cole, you need to go through the online public, open meetings, thank you, open meetings training. So we need to talk to you about that so we can get a certification from you that you took the training on open meetings requirements in the state of Texas. It's real easy, it's online, it takes you about an hour or so, okay? All right, no, that stays forever until they change the law. All right, well, thank y'all very much, we're adjourned.
Yeah, always.